Good morning. I am Nadine Pinar, your tutor for Numeracy and Mathematics NM21 for DJPE as well as DPPE. Welcome to this course. I will be responsible to mark your exam scripts as well as your assignments. In this presentation, I will focus only on general guidelines that I want everyone to keep in mind when you are writing an examination. Subject outcomes, meaning what is expected from the student. This subject or this module examines the following: the developing of numeracy in learners using different concepts, using numbers in everyday life, meaning why is numbers important, activities for teaching, sorting or classification, lesson plans on different topics. It is important for a teacher to know what the lesson plan will be. Teaching hand-eye coordination and visual training. Let's start off. The different concepts of measurement. What are the different concepts of measurement? And we should keep in mind, at this level, most of the things that we use that we are going to teach, we need to use practical objects. For instance, when we teach maths, what do I have in my classroom for me to make the learner aware of what maths is? First of all, I need to know that for maths, we use the concept light and heavy. So in my class, I know I have some objects. I can use my pen, I can use a box of crayons, and then I can ask the learners to feel, because here the learner needs to feel. I can ask the learner to take the pen and pick up his chair, and the learners now have to compare, because these concepts all have to do with comparison. So the learner will immediately, when the learner compare, know which of the objects is light and which one is heavy. Let them do it practical. Let them pick up things. Take a glass of water and an empty glass. Let the learner feel the mass so that the learner can compare his desk to the teacher's table. Which one is heavier? That is the way how we should teach these concepts. Very practical. The next concept, length. Again, what do we have in our classroom? The learner have his pencil and they have rulers. Most of them have rulers. Immediately, when the learner put those two items next to each other, the learner will compare and immediately see which one is shorter and which one is longer. They have to use practical objects so that they can see. They need to see these and they need to compare. Our next concept for measurement is capacity. Capacity, I may use two different size glasses or buckets where the learner can immediately identify which one, or I can ask the learner which of these two objects will have, if I pour in water, which one of these two will then have the most water. And from the size of it, the learner will identify it, or I can use the smaller one and see how many of the smaller one will go into the bigger one. So the learner compare, he can see and he knows that the smaller object will have less capacity than the bigger object. Lastly, time. Time, what does time have to do with? Time have to do with how long something takes place. At this stage, our learners need to know the days of the week and the names of the months of the year. The learner, you can ask your learner, what do they think is longer, one day or a week? Immediately, when they know the days of the week, they know there are 7 days in a week. So from there, they can compare that one day will be shorter than a week. So learners have to compare. Another thing that we have to look at when it comes to time is when we calculate time. How do we calculate time? For instance, if I have to do 5 hours and 48 minutes, and I add 3 hours and 32 minutes. How do I do this? How do I do this calculation? First of all, I look at my minutes. I have 48 minutes and I add my 32 minutes. 8 plus 2 gives me 10. 4 plus 3, 7 plus 1, 80. So now I have 80 minutes. And I know that 1 hour equals 60 minutes. So already I have 1 hour, and what do I have left? I have 20 minutes left. Now I add the hours. 5 hours plus my 3 hours plus the hour that comes from the 80 minutes. Now I have 8 hours, 9 hours, and then the 20 plus the 20 minutes. So to add these hours and minutes, my answer will be 9 hours and 20 minutes. So what I'm trying to tell you here, you first calculate your minutes. If there are more than 60 minutes, it becomes another hour. So now these hours I add with my hours that I already have there, and what is left is my minutes. Thank you. Activities to understand mathematical concepts. Sequencing. Let's look at sequencing. What is sequencing? Sequencing is mostly to do with the patterns. When I have objects, I have some counters. So for the learners, I can now put up a pattern. 2 purple ones, 1 green one, 2 red ones. Then I start again. 2 purple, 1 green, 2 red. Then I ask my learners to complete my pattern. So the learners immediately see the sequence. 2 purple, 1 green, 2 red. 2 purple, 1 green, 2 red. So the learner will be able now to complete or to continue with the sequence because they can see. I have to let them see what I am doing. I can also draw shapes, for instance, when I do sequencing. If I start off with a triangle with the base at the bottom. Then I continue with another triangle with the base at the top, another triangle, and I continue in this way. So the learner will immediately pick up that what is next is obviously, if he has to continue here, he has to complete it with the triangle that has a base at the bottom and then the one with the base at the top. I need to show them what I want them to see. Or even, I can even use beads. Beads are easy to get, so I can use beads and let them put them on strings in a pattern, in a sequence. Next, classifying. How do I classify objects? How do I classify objects? I can also use my counters of different colors. I'll give the learner counters of different colors or any objects of different colors, and then I can ask my learners to tell me or to classify it into different colors. So what they need to do now is they now put the colors together. I give them a group of items of different colors and ask them to classify them. So immediately they will look at the color and then they will be able to classify according to color. Also, I can give them items like different shapes. Yeah, I have 3 shapes. And when I ask the learners to classify, they will take all the objects that look the same, the triangles, the squares, and the rectangles, they will put apart. But all these things I need to do practical. Then also size, give them some small objects and some bigger objects and more bigger objects and ask them to classify those according to the size. Counting. Counting, obviously, counters, bottle tops, whatever you can lay your hands on. The best thing that we can have in our class is the abacus, where learners learn to count 1, 2, 3, and that is the way they learn to count. Or we can have sticks that we use. Now, what I will do is, I will ask learners, I give them a lot of counters, and I ask them now to make groups of 2 or 3, whatever I want to teach them. So learners will know now 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. They are making groups of 3. That is how I teach my learners to count. Practical counters, whether I can get my hands on some bottle caps or sticks or whatever I can get my hands on, so that they can do it practical. After I have done this, I can also give them worksheets now where I give them groups on the worksheet, groups of objects, and they have to now identify whether that is 1 object, 2 objects, whether there are 4 objects, 5 objects. They just have to encircle and then tell me how many objects they can see per group. That is how I do it practically. So again, please, when you write your exam, you have to make use of practical examples, always. Different learning styles. What are the different learning styles? How do different learners learn better or best? Some learn better when they see something, meaning visual. Visual, look at the word visual, it immediately brings vision to me, and vision meaning see. So these learners learn better when they see something. Another learning style is auditory. Auditory, that has to do with audio, meaning they learn better by hearing. Audio, hearing. Then we have our tactile learners, and those learners are the ones that learn better by feeling. They have to touch something to able to learn. So those are the ones that like to do experiments. They have to feel. You can take them out, let them play with mud, let them play with the counters. That is the way they learn better. So what is expected from you? Students should be able to list characteristics of these learning styles. How do I identify learners? How do these learners learn best? Now we come to lesson planning. Very important for a teacher to know that I have to plan ahead. Now, how do I start? Where do I start? I start with a theme. Let's take an example. Let's take maths as an example. So my lesson plan, my theme will be maths. That means what will I do? My lesson plan I usually get from my syllabus. So the topic, what is my topic? Obviously maths, because I'm going to do maths. My learning objective will then be something like at the end of the lesson, learners should be able to know what light and heavy means. When they have objects, I give them objects. So my lesson objective will be at the end of the lesson, learners will understand the difference between light and heavy. My basic competency, I also get from the syllabus, meaning what should the learners be able to do at the end of my lesson? They should be able to compare objects and decide which ones are light and which ones are heavy. My basic competency. Direct instruction. What am I going to do? That is direct instruction. What am I going to do during my lesson? When I have maths as an example, learners will be given objects and learners should be able to compare. They will pick up, they will carry some objects, and from there learners should be able to compare. So this is what I'm going to do during my lesson. Give them objects and they should pick it up and be able to compare. My closure. What am I going to do at the end of my lesson? I am going to give them objects. Individual learners I will call and I will ask them to take the objects, and then they have to tell me which ones are light and which ones are heavy. Because from the lesson that I have presented, they should be able to know heavy and what the difference is between heavy and light. Arrangement of learners have to do with what do I do during my lesson. Do I do group work? Do I have to let them work in pairs or just individual learners? It depends on the teacher or the kind of lesson that I am presenting. The teaching material, what am I using during my lesson? Do I use the chalkboard? Do I use a flip chart? What objects do I use? Do I use stones, pens, chairs, desks, whatever I use? Those are my teaching materials. And the assessment, how am I going to assess whether they know? Usually I give them a worksheet, draw some objects on the worksheet, and learners now have to decide which of those objects are heavy and which of those objects are light. That is how my lesson plan should look like. Counting skills. Teaching and principles of the different counting skills. So students should know the teaching. How do I teach these counting skills and what are the principles of those counting skills? Rational counting and rote counting. I should know the difference between the two. Rote counting, as we know, is just counting from 1 up to wherever the learners, the syllabus tells us to. That is why it's always better to have an abacus in our classes so that they just can continue counting as they play. They play with the abacus and they just continue counting. That is rote counting. And how can I teach this? I can have rhymes that starts that involves numbers. I have books that involves numbers, and then my number chart, and obviously my abacus. Rational counting has to do with the number of objects. So if I have 5 objects, I put up my 5 objects and I ask them now to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they have to know that this number, the last number that I say, 5, means that is how many objects I have in my group of objects that I have given them. Teaching concepts, doubling and halving. Doubling, again, I give my learners objects. Let's start with small numbers. I give them 2 objects and I ask the learners now, double those objects. And I have to lead them into getting that if I have 2 there, if I double, I should have 2 more. So at the end, 2 double is 1, 2, 3, 4. Or then 3 objects, they have to double, so they have 3 there, so this side they add another 3, so now they know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so doubles 3 is equal to 6, but they have to see, they have to do it practically. Same with halving. At this stage, learners are only confronted with even numbers, 2 or 4, and I ask the learners, I have 4 objects, can you halve those objects, meaning so that 2 people get the same amount of objects? Then learners know that they have to divide it into 2 groups, and this is halving. So always start with small numbers, and like I said, halving, even numbers, only even numbers. It is very important that we teach these concepts practical. Use sticks, counters, bottle caps, whatever you can get your hands on. Spatial awareness. What is spatial awareness? Spatial awareness has to do with the learner knows what is around him. He's aware of himself in his environment. That is spatial awareness. Characteristics of poor spatial awareness. How do I identify a learner that has poor spatial awareness? There are a list of things like they usually look clumsy, they bump into objects, they cannot tell between left and right. They are the ones that have problems with copying patterns. They find it difficult to do physical exercises because they cannot go over objects or under objects. That is how I identify those learners. How do I expand learners' vocabulary or spatial concepts? And then also a lesson plan how to teach spatial concepts. Then we come to figures. Important here is that we should be able to draw different figures and give properties. For example, the rectangle. And again, if it's possible, take practical examples. Here we have a rectangle so that the learners can see if we talk about 2 opposite sides that are equal. We can immediately see these 2 sides are equal and these 2 sides are equal. all angles are right angles, and in a rectangle there is a mistake there are only 2 lines of symmetry. That means if I fold my paper, my rectangular paper, if I fold my rectangular paper, I can only fold it 2 ways so that they can look the same. This side looks exactly the same than that side, the same, that side to look exactly the same as that side, so we only have 2 lines of symmetry. When it comes to the square, you can immediately see all 4 sides are equal. There are 4 right angles, and the square has 4 lines of symmetry because I can fold it any way. This way, that way, from that point to that point, and that point to that point, and it will look exactly the same. When it comes to conversion of units of measurement, millimeters, centimeters, meters, and kilometers. I work with what I already know. What do I know? I know that 10 millimeters equals 1 centimeter. 100 centimeters equals 1 meter, and 1,000 meters equals 1 kilometer. So if I'm asked to convert, say for instance I'm asked to convert 40 millimeters to centimeters. If I know that 1 centimeter equals 10 millimeters, immediately I will pick up that 40 millimeters will then be 4 centimeters. Or the vice versa. If I have 0.5 kilometers and I have to convert it to meters, I know that 1,000 meters gives me 1 kilometer. So here I don't have a whole kilometer, I have half a kilometer, 0.5 kilometers. That means 0.5 kilometers will be 500 meters. Same I do with kilograms and grams. What do I know? That 1,000 grams equals 1 kilogram. So if I am given 230 grams to convert to kilograms, what do I know? If 1,000 grams equals 1 kilogram, 230 grams is less than 1,000. So I will have 0.230. That is how I convert. Or if I have 2,300 grams to kilograms, 1,000 gram equals 1 kilogram, so 2,300 will be 2.300 kilograms. And the same I do with millimeters, because I know that 1,000 milliliters equals 1 liter. And that is the way I go about conversion. Counting. What are the advantages of counting? Usually, they ask me on national level or personal level. So when it comes to national level, What are the advantages? Why is the advantage to be able to count on national level? Here we know that on every 5 years or so they do census. Why do they do census? They have to know how many people there are in the country for us to plan ahead, for government to plan ahead, like for building schools, how many learners are there that needs new schools, how many hospitals should be built, because the more people we become, the more things we need. On personal level, for me to be able to go to the shop and go buy some items, I need to know what the things cost and how much I must pay for it, and how much change I must get. I also need to know if I have to set the table, how many forks, how many knives I need. So all these things I need to know. That is for on personal level. Then a few examples of exam questions. Spatial awareness is a crucial development that should be mastered by all children. Explain the different activities that could help learners to develop their mathematical spatial vocabulary. Draw the following figures and write 2 properties of each. Properties of figures. For example, the cube, the trapezium, the circle. Then a number sequence is a list of numbers written in a particular order. We did sequence, so you should be able to know. Write down the next 2 numbers and also the rule in each sequence below. There we have some examples. We are drawing to our end now. Allocation of marks. The examination requires students to give examples of how they will do certain activities rather than asking the recalling of facts. Meaning, how will you present these things to your learners? How will you go about? And remember, I stressed using practical examples where possible. Students must be able to give examples on how they will teach some topics. Most questions have words like calculate, mention, define, and explain. Solve and describe. Your exam total is 100 marks and the time is 2 hours. Please, students, make sure that when you answer, you don't waste too much time on specific questions, because we have come across that the mark allocation for a certain question is maybe 6 marks, and then the student write 2 pages. That is really irrelevant, because you are wasting your own time, and then at the end you don't finish your question paper. Exam cover page. Incomplete information may cause your exam paper to be marked by a wrong tutor. This has happened many times. Please write your student number clearly and correctly. Write your surname and name on the space or the column provided. Note that your subject code must be correct. For example, DJPE-NM21, as well as the subject name, numeracy, and mathematics 1. Fill in all required information to make sure that the cover page is correctly completed. Some common errors made by students. Obviously, writing wrong subject code on cover page, providing a wrong student number, papers not stapled tight, so some of your pages get lost, copying from each other, writing answers without using your own words as much as possible. Some of you left some questions unanswered. Some handwriting were really unreadable, and that caused you to lose some marks. If we cannot see what you have written there, it is a disadvantage to you. Some people wrote too little comparing to marks allocated. Please make sure that you look at the mark allocation. If it's 5 marks, make sure that you give 5 or at least 6 answers, not just 2, because you are going to lose marks. Poor language used, unprepared, required of the student. Read the question carefully and understand what is asked. Sometimes you just see a word and then you go ahead and write without even reading properly, and then you misinterpret the question. Answer all your questions. Sometimes you are not sure of questions, and then there might be some marks for you if you are not sure. As a teacher, again, always use practical examples where necessary. This will help you to earn good marks. Very important. Provide sufficient answers, meaning don't write too little or too much, like I just said. Also check the marks allocated to determine the length of your answer. Good luck. Be mindful of the time as you are writing the examination. Spend at least 2 minutes per mark. Don't waste time with questions that you don't know. Go to the ones you are comfortable with and then return to the difficult ones later. Don't just leave a question open. Go ahead and come back later. Prepare well in advance for the examination and don't wait until the last minute to study. If you are not ready, you will become nervous during the examination, and this could lead to failure. Write as neatly as you can. And remember, there is no substitute for hard work. I wish you luck, and I will see you again. Thank you.